I know it's hard to be an expert in everything, but do you have any history about giving or tithing that would be fun to share with our audience? Because this podcast is all about philanthropy and giving. So from first century to the Dark Ages to the Great Depression, anything fun you want to share?
The first explicit reference to a tithe in the Bible appears in Genesis 14, where Abraham tithes to Melchizedek, and in Genesis 28, where Jacob promises to give God a full tenth. It says there in the Hebrew. And so it's clear, I think, from Genesis 4 that the first family knew they had responsibility to give back to God a portion of what God had given to them. They were even held responsible for the kind of offering they gave. God accepted Abel's offering, and he rejected Cain's. In addition, since the Old Testament later links the offering of the firstborn and first fruits, it does it to the tithe. And so it's possible Abel's offering was accepted precisely because it was a form of a tithe. And the Old Testament is clear, God's people were to give back to him, and that he'd given instructions about what that entailed. When we come to something like the law in the Bible, which can often be confusing, granted, because New Testament believers are under a new covenant, it becomes clear, though, that the tithe is God's standard for giving. The tithe doesn't even belong to the giver, but to God. We find that in the Levitical law. Leviticus 27:30 says that specifically. And it was God's. God gives us these gifts. And so there was this understanding that gives some of it back. Under the Mosaic law, there appear to be 3 tithes: a regular tithe given to support the priests and the work of the temple, a festival tithe for the celebration of the required feast, and a charity tithe that was given every 3rd year to the Levite, the sojourner, and the fatherless. Oh, and the widow is another. So there's this philanthropic tithe that's included. If this is true, the Israelites were actually required to give 23.3% of their income, not just 10%. Many Old Testament scholars don't see these as 3 separate tithes, but as 3 uses of one. Yet even if there were 3 tithes, it's no surprise that the amount would increase when wedded with the ceremonial law, especially with the required festivals, all of that which has been fulfilled in Christ. We see this happen with something like the Sabbath. We see there's these realities of the eternal law rooted in creation, which takes on various ceremonial aspects in the Mosaic law, ceremonies involving showbread, for example. But this is what Paul is talking about in Colossians chapter 2, when he forbids letting anyone pass judgment in question to Sabbath. So under the law, under the new covenant, the ceremonial aspects fall away, but the moral law of the Sabbath remains. And I would say the same is true with the tithe. Basic tithe supporting the work of ministry remains, even while the ceremonial aspect falls away. So tithing in one way is done away with under the old covenant, yet simultaneously giving does not now become redundant. In the same way that Jesus says he hasn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. Christians are always to give to the poor and support other works that extend God's kingdom. We see that like 2 Corinthians 8 and 9. That's the whole point of that. The basic tithe is to be given to the church to support the work and mission of something like where we get the term tithe from in Malachi 3. So I would encourage people, you're no longer bound by the tithe. It's no longer 10%. You can give as much as you want.